Hello YouTube, Acres here again with another fun After Effects tutorial, and as promised we're taking a look at the After Effects bouncing text tutorial. Now some of you may already know how to create this effect, but what if I told you that this whole sequence was created entirely with 2 keyframes? Would you believe me? Well, I'm actually lying, but it's 4 keyframes, but still, if any of you have tried to do this manually, you'll know how many keyframes it takes to create this effect. And this opening sequence was done with just 2 single keyframes. And that's done with a bit of help from some expressions that we're going to be using, and we're going to be linking up expressions and all that good stuff in today's tutorial. So let's go ahead and get started. In a new composition, just in the interest of time, I've already got my text arranged here like so. And I'm just going to add a background, new solid. Make it the nice orange colour like so. There we go. So now once you've got your background and your text all arranged the way you want, the next thing to do is to define the anchor points of each text object, and we can do that by, if you select Y on your keyboard, that's going to bring up the pan behind tool, which is this one right here. And if we zoom in a little bit, you're going to see we've got a little crosshair on the text object, this one right here. Now what this crosshair represents is the anchor point, or as a better way of looking at it, a hinge. So wherever you move this anchor point to is where the hinge is going to be for the text. So for these top 2 After Effects, we're going to move the anchor point right to the top there like so. And we're also going to do the same. Grab the crosshair and move it above the composition like so. And we're also going to do the same for text and tutorial. We're going to grab the crosshair, but instead of moving it up, we're going to move it down off the composition. Same again for tutorial. We're going to grab the crosshair and move it down below the composition like so. And finally for the bouncing text, we're going to grab the crosshair and move it either to the left or to the right, and just move it off to the composition. And there we go. The next step is to turn all these layers 3D. So we're just going to turn all these 3D. Cool, so now that's done, what we're going to do, we're going to right click, new, and we're going to add a new adjustment layer. And we're going to call this adjustment layer Controls. Okay, once that's done, you want to come over to your effects. We're going to go down to expression controls and then select slider control. And this is where the expression comes in. So it's from Motion Graphics Exchange, and the expression's called inertial bounce. Now I can't take any credit for this, but the link will be in the description below, so you can just go over, and all you have to do is copy this, come back over to our slider control, hold down Alt and then click on the stopwatch, and then just paste that expression in. And that's all we need to do for now. So the next step is to link up the text objects, so we can do that. I'm going to select the first one, which is after, and then I'm going to hit R on the keyboard. That's going to bring up the orientation and rotation. So if I select the X rotation, this is the kind of movement that we're after. We want it to come and swing in like so. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down Alt again on my keyboard and then hit the little stopwatch of X rotation. And that's going to turn it into an expression X rotation, and that brings up this little spiral here. And what we're going to do, we're going to go back onto our controls, grab this spiral and then pick whip it to the slider controls. And once that's done, we're going to do the same for effects. So hit R on the keyboard, X rotation, hold down Alt and click the stopwatch. Go back onto our controls and then pick whip effects to the slider. And we're not going to do it to bounce, but we're going to do it to text and tutorial as well. So R to bring up the rotation, hold down Alt and click on the stopwatch of the X rotation. Select our controls and then pick whip to the slider. And then finally do the same for tutorial, so that's R on the keyboard, hold down Alt, select the stopwatch of the X rotation, select our controls, and then finally pick whip to the slider. And now what we're ready to do, we're ready to keyframe this slider. So I'm going to move to about 15 frames. And I'm going to click the stopwatch of the slider, and that's going to add a keyframe. You can see the keyframe here. And then if we move to the start of the timeline and then move the slider up maybe to 100, maybe 120. And now if I do a RAM preview, you can see that that is done within 2 keyframes. So now you can see that the After Effects and the text tutorial, they come in at the same time, and that's not what we want. We want each word to come in randomly. So to do that, all we have to do is duplicate our controls, so Command D or Control D if you're on a Windows computer. And now we've got Controls 2. So what I want the effects and the text to come in at a different time to the after and the tutorial. So to do that, all we have to do is select Effects, hit U on the keyboard, that's going to bring up our X rotation, and all we have to do is pick whip. Instead of pick whipping it to Controls 1, we just pick whip it to the Controls 2 that we've just duplicated, and we're going to do the same to text. So that's U on the keyboard, that will bring up our X rotation, select our Controls 2, pick whip that to the slider of Controls 2, and now all you have to do is select Controls 2 and maybe move it up a little bit like so. And if we do a RAM preview now, you can see that they both come in at different times now. And all you have to do is move the controls layer. So if we want it to come in really later, we just have to move the Controls 2 layer up a bit and it will come in later. Okay, so now that that's all done, we're ready to do the final text, which is bouncing. So to do that, all I'm going to do is once again hit R on the keyboard, Alt click. Actually, if you wanted to do the Y rotation, you could get this effect where it swings in from the side and does that effect. But we want the X rotation where it swings in like this, like so. So all we're going to do is Alt click on the X rotation and then pick whip to either one of our controls, it don't really matter, like so. Now we are going to need to animate the opacity of the bouncing text, because you can see it's visible before the other, so we just need to animate the opacity. So if you hit T on the keyboard, that's going to bring up the opacity, and if we just move forward a little bit to maybe around there, we're going to select the stopwatch, that's going to add a keyframe for the opacity, and then just move back a couple of frames to around there, and we're going to set it to 0. And if I do a RAM preview now, could do with moving the controls 2 up just a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. And there we go. Now if you wanted to animate them going back outwards, so swinging outwards, all you'd have to do is come onto your controls, select U to bring up the keyframes that we've already made, and move to maybe 2-3 seconds maybe. And we're going to add a keyframe for the slider, like so. And then we're going to move forward a few more frames and then set the slider amount to maybe 100, like so. And we're also going to need to do the same on the second controls layer, so hit U to bring up the keyframes that we've already made. And I'm going to add a keyframe at 0, move forward 10 frames, set this to 100, like so. And we're also going to need to animate the opacity of the bouncing text so it's not visible anymore. So I'm going to add a keyframe at 100 about here, move forward just 1 or 2 frames, and then set the opacity to 0. And if I do a quick RAM preview now to see how this is looking. Looking good, looking good. And there was one more thing, which was the kind of paper overlay, and that's really simple to do. All you have to do is, I've got this white paper texture here. So you just want to go onto Google Images, type in paper texture, and get a nice paper texture like this, and then you just want to import it, drag it into your composition. You want to make sure it's above all the other layers, and then you just want to turn the blend mode to multiply, and then anything that's below that layer will get that really nice paper texture. And also there is one more thing we could add. If we select this button here, which is the enable motion blur for all layers, and then we add motion blur to all the layers, we're going to get that really nice blurry effect as the text comes in. Just makes it that little bit more dynamic. And also if you come onto our controls and you hit U, this is going to bring up all our keyframes. And if you remember that expression that we copied and pasted, if you select and then scroll right down to the bottom, there's amplitude, there's frequency, and there's decay. And all these values, you can play around with these values, and they will change how the text bounces in, maybe how bouncy it is, how long the bounce lasts for. So if you just play around with amplitude, frequency and decay, you can get some really nice bouncing, maybe different bouncing effects. So that pretty much wraps it up for today's tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you learned something new. So don't forget to leave your feedback in the comments section below, and also rate the video if you found it helpful. And I will see you again very soon in another video tutorial. Thanks for watching guys, catch you later.